So this Shabbat, we're going to look at the Khag HaSakuth, and it's the Feast of Tabernacle or Booths. So I'm going to ask my Master Parker to assist me by reading the scripture. We're going to look at Uyqara 23, verse 33 to 43, or Leviticus. We're going to look at Bamadabar, or Numbers 29, verse 12 to 38. Looking at the Barim 16, or Deuteronomy 16, verse 13 to 17, and Shamut, or Exodus 23, verse 14 to 17. All right, Master Parker. So you can divide among yourself who's going to read what.
Uyqara 23, 33 to 43. And YaHUaH spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, On the 15th day of this 7th month is the festival of Sukkot, for 7 days to YaHUaH. On the first day is a Kodash gathering. You do no servile work. For 7 days you bring an offering made by fire to YaHUaH. On the 8th day there shall be a Kodash gathering for you, and you shall bring an offering made by fire to YaHUaH. It is a closing festival. You do no servile work. These are the appointed times of YaHUaH, which you proclaim as Kodash gatherings, to bring an offering made by fire to YaHUaH, a burnt offering and a grain offering, a slaughter and a drink offerings, as commanded for every day. Besides the Shabbaoth of YaHUaH, and besides your gifts, and besides all your vows, and besides all your voluntary offerings which you give to YaHUaH. On the 15th day of the 7th month, when you gather in the fruit of the land, celebrate the festival of YaHUaH for 7 days. On the first day is a rest, and on the 8th day a rest. And you shall take for yourselves on the first day the fruit of good trees, branches of palm trees, twigs of leafy trees, and willows of the stream, and shall rejoice before YaHUaH your Elohim for 7 days. And you shall celebrate it as a festival to YaHUaH for 7 days in the year, a law forever in your generations. Celebrate it in the 7th month. Dwell in booths for 7 days. All whom are native Yahudim dwell in booths, so that your generations know that I made the children of Israel dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Mitzrayim. I am YaHUaH your Elohim. Thus did Moshe speak of the appointed times of YaHUaH to the children of Israel.
So the for reading.
All right. Bamadabar 29, verses 12 to 38. And on the 15th Yom, or day of the 7th Kadash, or month, you have a Kadash gathering. You do no servile work, and you shall celebrate a festival to YaHUaH 7 days. And you shall bring near a burnt offering, an offering made by fire, a sweet fragrance to YaHUaH, 13 young bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs, a year old, perfect ones they are, and their grain offering, fine flour mixed with oil, 3/10 parts of each of the 13 bulls, for each of the 13 bulls, 2/10 parts for each of the 2 rams, and 1/10 part for each of the 14 lambs, and 1 male goat as a crime offering, besides the continual burnt offering, its grain offering, and its drink offering. Then on the 2nd Yom, 12 young bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs, a year old, perfect ones, and their grain offering and their drink offerings for the bulls, for the rams, and for the lambs, by their number according to the right ruling. And 1 male goat as a crime offering, besides the continual burnt offering with its grain offering and their drink offerings. And on the 3rd Yom, 11 bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs, a year old, perfect ones, and their grain offering and their drink offerings for the bulls, for the rams, and for the lambs, by their number according to the right ruling. And 1 goat as a crime offering, besides the continual burnt offering, its grain offering, and its drink offering. And on the fourth yom, 10 bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs, a year old, perfect ones, and their grain offering and their drink offerings for the bulls, for the rams, and for the lambs by their number, according to the right ruling. And 1 male goat as a prime offering, besides the continual burnt offering, its grain offering and its drink offering. Then on the fifth yom, 9 bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs, a year old, perfect ones, and their grain offering and their drink offerings for the bulls, for the rams, and for the lambs by their number, according to the right ruling. And 1 goat as a prime offering, besides the continual burnt offering, its grain offering, and its drink offering. Then on the sixth yom, 8 bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs, a year old, perfect ones, their grain offering and their drink offerings for the bulls, for the rams, and for the lambs by their number, according to the right ruling. And 1 goat as a prime offering, besides the continual burnt offering, its grain offering, and its drink offering. Then on the seventh yom, 7 bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs, a year old, perfect ones, and their grain offering and their drink offerings for the bulls, for the rams, and for the lambs by their number, according to the right ruling. And 1 goat as a prime offering, besides a continual burnt offering, its grain offering, and its drink offering. On the 8th yom, you have an assembly. You do no servile work, and you shall bring near a burnt offering, an offering made by fire, a sweet fragrance to YaHUaH. 1 bull, 1 ram, 7 lambs, a year old, perfect ones, their grain offering and their drink offerings for the bull, for the ram, and for the lambs, by their number, according to the right ruling. And 1 goat as a prime offering, besides the continual burnt offering, its grain offering, and its drink offering.
So for reading, the bar, the barim are Deuteronomy 16, verse 13 to 17. And I ask someone to read that for us.
Perform the festival of Sukkot for 7 days after the gathering from your threshing floor and from your winepress. And you shall rejoice in your festival, you and your son and your daughter and your male servant and your female servant and the Levite and the stranger and the fatherless and the widow who are within your gates. For 7 days you shall celebrate a festival to YaHUaH your Elohim in the place which YaHUaH chooses, because YaHUaH your Elohim barak you in all your increase and in all the work of your hands, and you shall be only rejoicing. 3 times a year all your males appear before YaHUaH your Elohim in the place which he chooses, at the festival of Matzot, and at the festival of Shavuot, and at the festival of Sukkot. And none should appear before YaHUaH empty-handed, each one with the gift of his hand, according to the barakah of YaHUaH your Elohim, which he has given you.
All right, so for reading. And we're going to look at Shamut, or Exodus 23, verse 14 to 17.
3 times in the year you are to celebrate a festival to me. Guard the festival of Matzot. 7 yomim you eat unleavened bread, as I commanded you at the time appointed in the month of Abib, for in it you came out of Mitzrayim. And do not appear before me empty-handed. And the festival of the harvest, the first fruits of your labors, which you have sown in the field, and the festival of the ingathering, at the outgoing of the year, when you have gathered in the fruit of all your labors from the field. 3 times in the year all your males are to appear before the Adani YaHUaH.
All right. Toda for reading. All right. So we see clearly that the Torah gives the first formal command in Uyqara Leviticus 23, but Madabar Numbers 29, and Dabarim or Deuteronomy 16. and calls it HaSakuth, which is the Feast of Booths, Tabernacles, or Thickets. All right, and that's according to Uyqara 23, verse 34. Or Khag Asa, which means the Feast of Ingathering or Harvest, according to Shalum 23, verse 16. So this dual naming links it both to dwelling in temporary shelters and to the harvest in gathering. Or in other words, redemption, memory, and completion and joy. You see, Torah also gives hints that Sakuth was not a brand new concept. It was rooted in earlier patriarchal patterns. You see, the book of Jubilee or Jubilees, written in Abrit, preserved in Giz, found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, preserved ancient Hebrew memory of the feast. According to, we're going to look at Jubilee 16, verse 20 to 31. And we're going to see clearly where Abraham kept a festival after Isaac's birth, 7 days with joy. It says Abraham established this as an eternal obedience for ordinance for Israel. And this is according to Jubilee 16, verse 20 to 31. And he built there an altar to YaHUaH, who had delivered him, who was making him rejoice in the land of his sojourning. And he celebrated a festival of joy in this month, 7 days, near the altar which he had built at the well of the oath. And he built booths for himself and for his servants on this festival. And he was the first to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles on the earth. And during these 7 days, he brought each day to the altar a burnt offering to YaHUaH, 2 oxen, 2 rams, 7 sheep, 1 he-goat, for a transgression offering, that he might atone thereby for himself and for his seed.
And as a thank offering, 7 rams, 7 kids, 7 sheep, and 7 he-goats, and their fruit offerings and their drink offerings. And he burnt all the fat thereof on the altar, a chosen offering unto YaHUaH for a sweet-smelling savor. And Bakar and Arab, or morning and evening, he burnt fragrant substances, frankincense and galbanum, and stacte, and nard, and myrrh, and spice, and costume. All these 7 he offered crushed, mixed together in equal parts and pure. And he celebrated this feast during 7 Yumim or days, rejoicing with all his heart and with all his being, and he and all those who were in his house, and there was no stranger with him, nor any that was uncircumcised.
And he Baruch his creator, who had created him in his generation, for he had created him according to his good pleasure. For he knew and perceived that from him would arise the plant of righteousness for the eternal generation, and from him a Kadash seed, so that it should become like him who had made all things. And he baruch and rejoiced. And he called the name of this festival the festival of YaHUaH, a joy acceptable to the Most High YaHUaH.
And we baruch him forever, and all his seed after him throughout all the generations of the Arats or the earth, because he celebrated this festival in its season, according to the testimony or the witness of the tablets of the Shamaim. For this reason, it is ordained on the tablets of the Shamaim concerning Yisrael that they shall celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles 7 days with joy or gladness in the 7th month, acceptable before YaHUaH, a statute forever throughout their generations every year. And to this there is no limit of days, for it is ordained forever regarding Yisrael that they should celebrate it and dwell in booths and place wreaths upon their heads and take leafy boughs and willows from the brook. And Abraham took branches of palm trees and the fruit of goodly trees, and every going around the altar with the branches 7 times a in the bakar, he praised and gave thanks to his YaHUaH for all things in joy.
All right, Toda, for assisting me, Moreh. So this is explicitly identified as the Feast of Tabernacle. You see, Jubileum or Jubilees 32, verse 49. Jacob, after his dream at Bethel, built a booth or a sakah for himself and his servant. He called the place HaSakuth. And this is according to Barashita, Genesis 33, verse 17. I'm going to ask someone to read it for us.
And Jacob journeyed to Sakuth, and built him a house, and made Sakuth for his cattle. Therefore the name of the place is called Sakuth.
All right, so there we see it. All right, so Jubilee adds that he too kept the feast there 7 days with sacrifices and rejoicing. So Moreh, ask you to continue to. So I'm going to ask you to read for me Jubilee 32, verse 4 to 9.
And on the 15th of this month, he brought to the altar 14 oxen from amongst the cattle, and 28 rams, and 49 sheep, 7 lambs, 21 kids of goats, as a burnt offering on the altar of sacrifice, well pleasing for a sweet savor before YaHUaH. This was his offering in consequence of the vow which he had vowed that he would give a tenth with their fruit offerings and their drink offerings. When the fire had consumed it, he burned incense on the fire over the fire, incense on the fire over the fire, and for a thank offering 2 oxen and 4 rams and 4 sheep, 4 he-goats, 2 sheep of a year old, and 2 kids of the goats, and thus he did daily for 7 days. And he and all his sons and his men were eating this with gladness there during the 7 Yomim, or days, and barakah, or praising and thanking YaHUaH, who had delivered him out of all his tribulation and had given him his vow. And he tithed all the clean animals and made a burnt sacrifice. For the unclean animals he gave to Louis his ban or son, and he gave him all the beings of men. And Louis discharged the priestly office at Bethel before Jacob his Ab, or his father, in preference to his 10 brothers, or Akim, and he was a Kahan, or priest, there. And Jacob gave his vow. So he tithed again the tithe to YaHUaH, and he sanctified it, and it became Kadash unto him.
All right. Toda for reading, Moreh. So we see clearly that Jubilee shows that Sukkot are ground Sukkot in the lives of our ancestor, or a boot, such as Abraham and Jacob, where they were celebrating it at Sinai. So it is clearly obvious that this portrayed the feast not as a new invention of Masha, but as a restoration of Asian covenantal worship. So looking at the Hebraic origin. So ancestral beginnings. So we see Abraham connected Sakut with the miracle of Isaac, or Isaac, birth, gladness, covenant fulfillment, future generation in all it. So Jacob associate it with dwelling in booths during sojourning. So this dependency and divine protection of YaHUaH. So Sukkot ties both to covenant promises fulfilled and dwelling under YaHUaH's covering. So agriculture and creation pattern. So 7th month. So 7 completion cycle of the year. And also in gathering feast, harvest of creation, symbolic of YaHUaH's final ingathering of all nations. And the Bud, the microcosm of Adon, restored a dwelling under YaHUaH's direct shelter. So we're going to look at the pattern of the Shamayim. So Jubilee repeatedly says the ancestor kept feasts, as it is written and ordained on the tablets of the Shamayim. Now, what does this mean? It means HaSakuth is not only historical, but reflects a divine mode fixed before creation, with Malachim also keeping it. So when linked with Jubilee, Torah, and Nabim, we see the picture becomes richer. So I'm going to ask you to assist me by reading YaHUaH 14, verse 16 to 19.
And it shall be that all who are left from all the Gentiles which came up against Jerusalem shall go up from year to year to bow themselves to the sovereign YaHUaH to Sabaoth, and to celebrate the festival of HaSakuth. And it shall be that if anyone of the clans of the earth does not come up to Jerusalem to bow himself to the sovereign YaHUaH to Sabaoth, on them there is to be no rain. And if the clan of Matstream does not come up and enter in, then there is none. On them is the plague with which YaHUaH plagues the Gentiles who do not come up to celebrate the festival of HaSakuth. This is the punishment of Matstream, and the punishment of all the Gentiles that do not come up to observe the festival of HaSakuth.
All right, total for reading. So we mentioned all the nation kept HaSakuth after judgment. Ties back to Abraham's promise of Barakah to all nations. So I'm going to ask someone to read for us YaShayahu 4, verse 5 to 6.
Then YaHUaH shall create above every dwelling place of Mount Sion, and above her assemblies, a cloud and smoke by Yom, and the shining of a flaming fire by Lila. For over all the esteem shall be a covering, and a booth for shade in the daytime from the heat, for a place of refuge, and for a shelter from storm and rain.
Right, to the Faridi. So we see here YaHUaH's Sakah, a shelter over Mount Sion. All right. I'm going to ask someone to read Yakazakala Ezekiel 37, verse 27 for me.
And my dwelling place shall be over them, and I shall be their Elohim, and they shall be my people.
All right. So we see here that Mashkan of YaHUaH permanently with his people. Now we see Yubalim patriarchs foreshadow this feast as covenantal celebration of seed, dwelling, and gladness. So HaSakuth is the appointed time when history circles back to Adon with gladness, fruitfulness, and divine dwelling. All right, Mash Parker. All right, so the instruction for this feast are found primarily in the scripture that we read earlier. Uyqara 23, verse 33 to 43. Adabarim, Deuteronomy 16, verse 13 to 17. The Madabar 29 and Numbers 29, verse 12 to 38. And Shamut, Exodus 23, verse 14 to 17. So, looking at the first one, timing. If you realize, it said it begins on the 15th Yom, or 15th day of the 7th month, or Kadash, and lasts 7 Yomim, with an 8th Yom as a solemn assembly. Again, this is according to Uyqara 23, verse 34 to 36. Secondly, it is a command. Israel is to dwell in HaSakuth, or booths, or temporary shelters, for 7 Yomim. All right. Now, this again is according to Leviticus or Uyqara 23, verse 42. Now, this scripture tells us the purpose. And that's the third one. What's the purpose? That your generation may know that I made the children of Israel dwell in Sukkot when I brought them out of the land of Mitzrayim. And this again is according to Uyqara 23, or Leviticus 23, verse 43. Number 4, the nature of the celebration. You shall rejoice before YaHUaH 7 days. So it's not a time to be sorrowful or mournful. It is a time for us to celebrate or rejoice before YaHUaH for 7 yomim. And this again is according to Leviticus or Uyqara 23 verse 40. And what we read earlier, it speaks also about offerings. An offering was brought before YaHUaH throughout the feast. All right?
And of course, a lot of persons tend to think that because, having observed, there are some persons who, because there is no monetary tithe, some people believe they are now free from giving offerings. But the Most High declared, no one should appear before me empty-handed. So we all ought to give offerings unto the Most High YaHUaH during this time. It's a big part of the festival.
All right, toda for sharing, Moreh. So we're gonna do a Hebraic insight. The feast recalls not only Israel wilderness dwelling, but also YaHUaH's own dwelling among his people. Now, the Greek word sakah is not simple a hut. It carries the sense of a shelter overshadowed by YaHUaH's presence. So I'm going to ask someone to read for us. Tahal, or Psalms 27, verse 5.
For in the day of evil he hides me in his booth. In the covering of his tent he hides me. On a rock he raises me up.
All right, toda for reading. So we see even in Tahal 27, verse 5, speak about in the secret of his sakar or booth, he shall hide me. So this symbolizes dependence on YaHUaH rather than permanence in human-built structure. So the Nabim used tabernacles imagery to point beyond the wilderness memory. We read this scripture earlier, YaHUaH 14, verse 16 to 19, where all nations will come to Jerusalem to keep the Feast of Tabernacle, or else they will receive no rain. So we see where this ties sakah with life-sustaining rain, dependence on YaHUaH as provider. YaShayahu 4, verse 5 to 6. Focus on YaHUaH creates a cloud by yom, or day, and flaming fire by Lila, or night, over Mount Sion, and there shall be a sakah for shade, refuge, and shelter. So we see HaSakuth foreshadows the restored covering presence of YaHUaH. Yakazakal 37 verse 27. My mashrakan, or my dwelling place, shall be with them, and I will be their Elohim. and they shall be my people. So we see the idea here shifts from physical boots to permanent divine indwelling. So, Parker. So far, what themes have we observed? There are several covenantal themes covered in this feast. You see, the great departure memory. We see clearly Israel dwell in temporary shelters when redeemed out of Mitzrayim. And HaSakuth is a memorial of redemption. We see where it focuses on the agriculture in gathering. Call Khag, Asaph, Feast of Ingathering at the year's end. And this is from Shalum 23, verse 16. It clearly marks harvest completion. Spiritually, it points to the final ingathering of YaHUaH's people. Gladness and rejoicing. Unlike Yom Kippur, HaSakuth is about overflowing delight. Gladness is not circumstantial, but rooted in YaHUaH's covering. Divine dwelling. The Saka is a shadow of YaHUaH present. Tabernacling with Uyqara. According to Shalum 25, verse 8, let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. And temporary to eternal. We see HaSakuth emphasizes our sojourning. Even the land, as Israel, we must all recall that our dwelling is temporary, anticipating YaHUaH's eternal Sakah over us.
If I may add, there are some persons who may have wondered, the scripture keeps mentioning 7 Yom or days, but then says you have an assembly or a Kadash assembly on the 8th Yom, but does not specify in the books they gave us among the 66 how this came about. But when we read Jubileum 32, if we read from verses 1 to 29 for context in our own time, but for the sake of those who may want to be able to follow, verses 24 to 29, this is Jacob. YaHUaH has given him a vision of things to come, things that will happen, and he is then instructed to write down all that he heard and all that he saw. But verses 24 to 29 say, fear not, for as you have seen and read, this is what it shall be. And you must write down everything as you have seen and read. And Jacob said, YaHUaH, how can I remember all that I have read and seen? And he said unto him, I will bring all things to your remembrance. And he went up from him, and he awoke from his sleep, and he remembered everything which he had read and seen, and he wrote down all the words which he had read and seen. And he celebrated there yet another Yom, or another day. This is during the Feast of Tabernacles. And he sacrificed thereon according to all that he sacrificed on the former days, and called its name Addition. For this Yom was added, and the former days he called the feast. So he called the first 7 the feast, and he called Yom 8 Addition. Verse 28, and so it was manifested that it should be, and it is written on the tablets of the Shamayim. Wherefore it was revealed to him that he should celebrate it and add it to the 7 days of the feast. And its name was called Addition, because it was recorded amongst the days of the feast days according to the number of the days of the year. So we can see why, coming out of these themes and requirements for the feast, we see where we dwell in booths for 7 Yomim, but you're not told to dwell in booths for 8 Yomim, because the 8th day or Yom is the addition. And if we read in our own time, Jubilees or Jubileem 32, verses 1 to 29, we will have deeper context, of what happened with Jacob. And we'll see there how the 8th Yom was added. And this is why on the 8th Yom there is a Kadash assembly unto the Most High YaHUaH.
YaHUaH. So that for sharing, Moreh.
For sure.
So Hebraically, HaSakuth is not simple backward looking, but points forward. It points forward to the ingathering of the nation. Now, according to YaHUaH, shows all nations streaming to Jerusalem at HaSakuth. This indicates the extensive scope of redemption, not Israel alone, but all people who submit to YaHUaH. So it also points forward to the final dwelling. You see, Kazun 21 verse 3 echoes what Ezekiel as Yakazakal said, behold, the Sakah of Elohim is with men, and he will dwell with them. So the temporary booths anticipate the permanent dwelling of YaHUaH with his people in the renewed creation. So HaSakuth is both a memorial of wilderness redemption and also a prophecy of eternal dwelling. So the great feast where YaHUaH himself spread his Sakah over all who are his. So we see YaHUaH chapter 7, 8 focus on Yahusha at Sukkot. And the text says plainly, and the festival of the Yehudim was near. The festival of HaSakuth. And this is verse 7 of YaHUaH. Chapter 7, verse 2 of YaHUaH. And it goes further down to show in verse 14 of that same chapter, YaHUaH goes up midway through the feast and teaches. And on the last Yom, the great day of the festival, YaHUaH stood and cried out, "If anyone thirsts, let him come to me, and let him who believes in me drink." As the scripture said, out of his innermost shall flow rivers of living water. And this is according to YaHUaH 7, verse 37 to 38. So immediately after that, he says, "I am the light of the world." And that is in chapter 8 of YaHUaH, verse 12. You see, these statements connect directly to Torah and the Nabim, or prophets. So transfiguration. So we're going to look at Matthew 17, Marcus 9, and Lucas 9. I'll ask you to assist me by reading these chapters.
YaHUaH 17. And after 6 days, YaHUaH took Kapha and Yaqub and YaHUanan his brother, and brought them up on the high mountain by themselves. And he was transformed before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his garments became as white as the light. And see, Masha and Eliyahu appeared to them, talking with him. And Kapha answering said to YaHUaH, "Adoni, it is good for us to be here. If you want, let us make here 3 booths, one for you, one for Masha, and one for Eliyahu." While he was still speaking, see, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and see, a voice came out of the cloud saying, "This is my bond, and beloved, in whom I delight. Hear him." And when the Talmudim heard, they fell on their faces and were much afraid. But YaHUaH came near and touched them and said, "Arise and do not be afraid." And having lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but YaHUaH only. And as they were coming down from the mountain, YaHUaH commanded them, saying, "Do not mention the vision to anyone until the Ban Adam is raised from the dead." And his Talmudim asked him, saying, "Why then do the scribes say that Eliyahu has to come first?" And YaHUaH answering said to them, "Eliyahu is indeed coming first, and shall restore all. But I say to you that Eliyahu has already come." And they did not recognize him, but did to him whatever they wanted. In this way, the Ban Adam is also about to suffer by them. Then the Talmudim understood that he had spoken to them about YaHUanan the immerser. And when they came to the crowd, a man came up to him, kneeling down to him, and saying, "Adoni, have compassion on my son, for he is an epileptic and suffers badly, for he often falls into the fire and often into the water. And I brought him to your Talmudim, but they were unable to heal him." And YaHUaH answering said, "O generation, unbelieving and corrupted, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring him here to me." And YaHUaH rebuked the demon, and it came out of him, and the child was healed from that hour. And the Talmudim came to YaHUaH by himself and said, "Why were we unable to cast it out?" And YaHUaH said to them, "Because of your unbelief. For truly, I say to you, if you have belief as a mustard seed, you shall say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it shall move, and no matter shall be impossible for you. But this kind does not go out except through prayer and fasting." And while they're still in Galil, YaHUaH said to them, the bond Adam is about to be delivered up to the hands of men, and they shall kill him. And the third yom he shall be raised up. And they were deeply grieved. And when they came into Kafar Nahum, those who received the tax came to Kapha and said, does your teacher not pay the tax? He said, yes. And when he came into the house, YaHUaH spoke to him first, saying, what do you think, Shimon? From whom do the sovereigns of the earth take toll or tax? From their own sons or from the strangers? Kapha said to him, from the strangers. YaHUaH said to him, then the sons are exempt. But lest we cause them to stumble, go to the sea, cast in the hook, and take the fish that comes up first. And when you have opened its mouth, you shall find a coin. Take that and give it to them for me and you.
All right, turn for reading. Marcus, Mark 9.
Marcus 9. And he said to them, truly I say to you that there are some standing here who shall not taste of death at all until they see the reign of Elohim having come in power. And after 6 days, YaHUaH took Kapha and Chag and YaHUanan and led them up on a high mountain alone by themselves. And he was transformed before them, and his garments became glittering, exceedingly white, like snow, such as no launderer on earth is able to whiten. And there appeared to them Eliyahu with Masha, and they were talking with YaHUaH. And Kapha responding said to YaHUaH, Rabbi, it is well for us to be here, and let us make 3 booths, one for you, and one for Masha, and one for Eliyahu, because he did not know what to say, for they were exceedingly afraid. There came a cloud overshadowing them, and a voice came out of the cloud saying, this is my bond, the beloved, hear him. And suddenly looking around, they no longer saw anyone with them, but only YaHUaH.
All right.
Can I read beyond that?
That's all right. Turn for reading was turn for reading Moreh. Luke, go ahead.
And having called his 12 Talmudim together, he gave them power and authority over all demons and to heal diseases. And he sent them to proclaim the reign of Elohim and to heal the sick. And he said to them, take not for the journey neither staffs, nor bag, nor bread, nor silver. Neither have 2 undergarments. And whatever house you enter, stay there, and go out from there. And as for those who do not receive you, when you go out of that city, shake off the dust from your feet as a witness against them. And going out, they went through the villages, bringing the good news and healing everywhere. And Herodes, the district ruler, heard of all that was done by him, and was perplexed, because it was said by some that YaHUanan had been raised from the dead, and by some that Eliyahu had appeared, and by others that one of the old Nabaim had risen up. And Herodes said, YaHUanan, I have beheaded, but who is this of whom I hear such? And he was seeking to see him. And the emissaries, when they had returned, related to him all they had done. And he took them, and they withdrew by themselves to a city called Beth Saida. And when the crowds knew it, they followed him. And having received them, he was speaking to them about the reign of Elohim, and healed those who had need of healing. And as the day began to decline, the 12 came and said to him, Send the crowd away, that going to the surrounding villages and countries, they might lodge and get food, because here we are in a lonely place. But he said to them, You give them to eat. And they said, We have no more than 5 loaves and 2 fish, unless we go and buy food for all these people. And there were about 5,000 men. And he said to his Talmudim, Make them sit down in groups of 50. And they did so, and made them all sit down. And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, having looked up to the Shamayim, he barak and broke them, and gave them to the Talmudim to put before the crowd. So they all ate and were satisfied. And 12 baskets of the broken pieces were picked up by them. And it came to be, as he was alone, praying, the Talmudim were with him. And he asked them, saying, Who do the crowd say that I am? And they answering said, YaHUaH the immerser, but others, YaHUaH, and others say that one of the old Nabaim has risen up. And he said to them, And you, who do you say that I am? And Kapha answering said, HaMashiach of YaHUaH. And strictly warning them, he commanded them to say this to no one, saying, The Bana Adam has to suffer much, and to be rejected by the elders and the chief Kohanim and scribes, and to be killed and to be raised the 3rd day. And he said to them all, If anyone wants to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his stake daily and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life shall lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake shall save it. For what is a man profited if he gains all the world and is himself destroyed or lost? For whoever is ashamed of me and my words, of him the bond of Adam shall be ashamed when he comes in his esteem and in his fathers, and of the Qadash messengers. But truly I say to you, there are some standing here who shall not taste death at all till they see the reign of Elohim. And it came to be, about 8 days after these words, talking with him, Kapha and YaHUaH and Yaqub, he went up to the mountain to Palau. And it came to be, as he prayed, the appearance of his face changed and his garment radiant white. And see, 2 men were talking with him, who were Masha and Eliyahu, who having appeared in esteem, spoke of his death, which he was about to complete at Jerusalem. But Kapha and those with him were heavy with sleep, and having awakened, when they saw his esteem and the 2 men standing with him, and it came to be, as they were parting from him, Kapha said to Yahusha, Adani, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 booths, one for you, one for Masha, and one for Eliyahu, not knowing what he said. And as he was saying this, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud. And a voice came out of the cloud saying, This is my bond, the beloved. Hear him. And when the voice had spoken, Yahusha was found alone, and they were silent and reported to no one in those days any of what they had seen.
Thank you. Toda for reading. Stopping at verse 36. Toda for reading. All right. So, Kapha, we see in all 3 chapters, suggests making 3 HaSakuth for Yahusha, Masha, and Eliyahu. So a bright cloud overshadows them, and the voice said, This is my son, hear him. So from a Hebrew standpoint, we see the instinct to build booths is recognition of HaSakuth's essence, or dwelling with YaHUaH. But the correction shows that Yahusha himself is a sakah of divine dwelling, not a temporary booth. So we're going to look at Shalamas, Ayikal, dedication, and the marriage supper of the Lamb. And these are the chapters that we're going to focus on. First, Malachi chapter 8, our First Kings 8, YaShayahu 25, verse 6 to 9, or Isaiah 25, and Kazun 19, Revelation 19, verse 7 to 9. So, when I ask someone to read for us, first Malachi, chapter 8, we're going to ask you to read. These are the verses that we want you to focus on with this chapter. Verse 1 to 6 and verse 10 to 11, verse 27 and verse 43 to 40, 41 to 43. Who's going to take it?
I can read it.
All right.
Then Shalom assembled the elders of Yisrael and all the heads of the tribes, the chief fathers of the children of Yisrael, the sovereign, Shalom Yerushalayim, to bring up the ark of the covenant of YaHUaH from the city of Dawood, which is in Zion. And all the men of Yisrael assembled to sovereign Shalom at the festival in the month of Ethanim, which is the 7th month. And all the elders of Yisrael came, and the Kohanim took up the ark, and brought up the ark of YaHUaH and the tent of appointment, and all the Kodash utensils that were in the tent. And the Kohanim and all the Levites brought them up. And the sovereign Shalom and all the congregation of Yisrael who had assembled with him were with him before the ark, slaughtering so many sheep and cattle that they could not be counted or numbered. And the Kohanim brought in the ark of the covenant of YaHUaH to its place, into the speaking place of the house, to the most Kodash place, under the wings of the cherubim. 10 to 11. And it came to be, when the Kohanim came out of the Kodash place, that the cloud filled the house of YaHUaH, so that the Kohanim were unable to stand to perform the service because of the cloud, for the esteem of YaHUaH filled the house of YaHUaH. 27.
Go ahead.
For it is true, Elohim dwells on the earth. See, the Shamayim and the Shamayim and the Shamayim of the Shamayim are unable to contain you. How much less this house which I have built? And 41 to 43. Also concerning a foreigner who is not of your people Yisrael, but has come from a far land for your name's sake, since they hear of your great name and your strong hand and your outstretched arm, and he shall come and pray towards this house. Here in the Shamayim, your dwelling place, and do according to all for which the foreigner calls to you, so that all peoples of the earth know your name and revere you, as do your people Yisrael, and know that this house which I have built is called by your name.
All right. Total for reading. In YaHUaH 25, or Isaiah 25, verse 6 to 9.
And in this mountain YaHUaH of armies shall make for all people a feast of choice pieces, a feast of old wines and choice pieces with marrow, of old wines well refined. And he shall swallow up on this mountain the surface of the covering which covers all people, and the veil which is spread over all nations. He shall swallow up death forever. The Adani YaHUaH shall wipe away tears from all faces, and take away the reproach of his people from all the earth, or their wraths. For YaHUaH has spoken. And it shall be said in that yom, or that day, see, this is our Elohim. Sanika, we have waited for him, and he saves us. This is YaHUaH. We have waited for him. Let us be glad and rejoice in his deliverance.
All right, total for reading. And Kazun 19, verse 7 to 9.
Let us be glad and rejoice and give him praise, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his wife prepared herself. And to her it was given to be dressed in fine linen, clean and bright. For the fine linen is the righteousness of the Quadashim. And he said to me, Right, Baruch are those who have been called to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said to me, These are the true words of Elohim.
All right, total for reading. Total for reading. So we see Solomon temple dedication. Looking at first Malachim, verse chapter 8. So Solomon gathers Israel at the Uyqara, or what some may know as temple, for HaSakuth, the Feast of Tabernacles. We see HaSakuth emphasizes temporary dwelling and dependency on YaHUaH. By dedicating a permanent temple at this feast, Solomon shows a transition from provisional shelters to a centralized dwelling for YaHUaH's splendor. So first Malachi chapter 8, looking at the verse 10 to 11, we see the cloud demonstrate that true dwelling is YaHUaH's choice, not human construction. The booths of HaSakuth foreshadows this, preparing Israel to see YaHUaH's splendor in the temple. So first Malachi 8 verse 27 shows that Shalum Shalum declares that YaHUaH cannot be contained by human houses. So HaSakuth teaches dependency on divine provision and presence. The temple is a symbolic anchor for the concept that YaHUaH's presence transcends physical structures, but can choose to manifest among his people. So looking at first Malachi 8 verse 41 to 42 that we read. So Shalom prays for foreign nations who come to the temple. So we see even this first temple, HaSakuth foreshadows the gathering of all nations, a central theme fulfilled in the marriage supper of the Lamb. Looking at YaHUaH 25 verse 6 to 8, we see YaHUaH prepares a feast for all nations. That is swallowed, mourning, removed. You see, the harvest gladness of HaSakuth anticipates a final eschatological harvest where his people dwell fully in his presence. So temporary booths will lead to eternal fellowship. And looking at the final verse in YaHUaH 25 verse 9, even as Israel gathered at the temple to celebrate YaHUaH's splendor during HaSakuth, the redeemed gather at the ultimate feast to celebrate full salvation. So Kazun, Revelation 19, looking at verse 7 to 9, call the marriage supper of the Lamb. Invitation extend to all nations. The Mashiach feast is a culmination of HaSakuth gladness, where Ruach, light, and divine dwelling are fully realized. You see, YaHUaH as the Lamb reveals the splendor that the temple ain't at. So I'm gonna ask someone to read Revelation 7, or Kazun 7, read verse 9 to 17, looking at the ingathering of the nation. So Revelation Kazun 7, verse 9 to 17.
After this I looked and saw a great crowd, which no one was able to count, out of all the nations and tribes and peoples and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, dressed in white robes and palm branches in their hands, and crying out with a loud voice, saying, Deliverance belongs to our YaHUaH, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb. And all the messengers stood around the throne, and the elders and the 4 living creatures, and fell on their faces before the throne and worshipped Elohim, saying, Truly, the barakah and the esteem and the wisdom and the thanksgiving and the respect and the power and the might to our YaHUaH forever and ever. And one of the elders responded, saying to me, Who are these dressed in white robes, and where do they come from? And I said to him, Master, you know. And he said to me, These are those coming out of the great distress, having washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Because of this, they are before the throne of Elohim, and serve him day and night in his dwelling place. And he who sits on the throne shall dwell among them. They shall hunger no more, neither thirst any more, neither shall the sun strike them, nor any heat. Because the Lamb who is in the midst of the throne shall shepherd them and lead them to the fountains of waters ahai, and Elohim shall wipe away every tear from their eyes.
All right. Toda for reading. Toda for reading. So we see multitude from all nations, holding palm branches, standing before the throne. You see, according to Kazun 7, verse 15, you see, he who sits on the throne will spread a sakah over them, meaning that they are sheltered. You see, palm branches connect to ingathering harvest that we mentioned in Shalom 23, verse 16, Uyqara 23, verse 40. I'm going to ask someone to remind us of these verses. Can someone read them for us?
In the festival of the harvest, the first fruits of your labors which you have sown in the field, and the festival of the ingathering at the outgoing of the year, when you have gathered in the fruit of your labors from the field.
All right. And Uyqara 23, verse 40.
And you shall take for yourselves on the first day the fruit of good trees, branches of palm trees, twigs of leafy trees, and willows of the stream, and shall rejoice before YaHUaH, your Elohim, for 7 Yumim.
So again, we see palm branches connect to ingathering harvest rejoicing. All right? Then I ask someone, all right, so Revelation Akazun 21, verse 3. So behold, the succor of Elohim is with men, and he shall dwell with them. You see, this is the ultimate HaSakuth. No longer temporary booths, but YaHUaH's permanent presence dwelling with his people. So, my spark, as we close this day, this lesson on the Feast of Tabernacles, of booths, let us take to heart what YaHUaH is showing us. HaSakuth is not just about dwelling in booths or remembering a harvest. It is about remembering that our lives are fragile shelters and our true covering is YaHUaH himself. So it is about joyfully receiving his provision, rain, and rook, and preparing for the Yom when all nations will come before him in the new Jerusalem to keep this feast. A few days remain, my Mashpaka, before the appointed time arrives. So let us use them to ready ourselves, put ourselves together, to clear out all the distraction, to separate time, and to enter the feast, not only with outward observance, but with inward rejoicing. YaHUaH invites the thirsty to come and drink of YaHUaH's outpoured ruach and to walk in his light. That means when we step into HaSakuth, we are stepping into a time of renewal. Not only remember what YaHUaH has done in the past, but anticipating what he will do in the future. Finally, Ms. Parker, let us remember that HaSakuth is more than a feast of temporary booths. It is a rehearsal of divine presence and future fulfillment. Just as Shalama dedicated the Uyqara during HaSakuth, showing that YaHUaH's splendor could dwell among his people, even in a house made by humans' hands. So too does this feast point forward to the ultimate celebration, the marriage supper of the Lamb, when all nations will rejoice in YaHUaH's presence eternally. The booths, the gladness, harvest imagery all call us to prepare our hearts now, to live in dependency on YaHUaH, to seek his ruach, and to walk in his light, anticipating the full delight and fellowship that will be realized when his reign comes in its fullness. Barak YaHUaH.
YaHUaH.
YaHUaH. All right, Ms. Parker, we're going to repeat our declaration, the Hall 119, looking at verse 145 to 152, looking at the Kaf. All right, so again, we're going to say what is in red and continue to what is in black. What's in blue or in the bracket is the interpretation of what is said in red. All right, so after two, Akhad Shatim. Karathi with all my heart.
Answer me,
O
O
YaHUaH.
YaHUaH.
I observe your statutes.
Karathi,
Save me, that I might guard your witnesses. Kadamati, dawn and cry for help. I have waited for your word. Kadamu,
have
my eyes, the night watches, to study your word. Kuli, hear according to your loving commitment. O YaHUaH, revive me according to your right ruling. Karabu, who pursue mischief, they have been far from your Torah. Karub
are you,
O YaHUaH, and all your commands are truth.
Kadam,
I
I have
have
known your witnesses,
that you have founded them forever. YaHUaH. We are the Nazarene of YaHUaH.
And of course, we say Akhad
Ahabah,
which means
one love.
And we thank all our viewers and subscribers, all the family of the Most High, for viewing today's presentation.